Hey guys, so I'm back in the saddle. I've been out for a little bit. Was on vacation. That I have been dealing with sickness the last several weeks, but back in the saddle. I've been reflecting on this topic the last week and been praying, just kind of thinking how I want to respond. And I have a few thoughts I want to share with you guys. Hopefully, you'll take the time to listen. And first of all, I want to try to be very, very humble in my perspective on this. And I think it's super important things like this when you're trying to reflect and discern with a topic like being at war with a country and what are the implications. It's super important just to have a posture of one of the greatest resources out there is knowledge, understanding. It's also one of the greatest deficits we have as well on topics such as this. So I think it's important when we're approaching this to be humble and to also understand that there are so many voices out there that are competing to try to inundate you, confuse, confound your mind into believing narratives that simply are just completely fake and bogus. And I think it's important to understand that we don't have much of the intel that people who are engaged in this conflict have. It's just a fact. And so when I hear people, like I'll give you an example. There was someone I heard talking recently in an interview, and this guy was like, he was binary in his perspectives. And okay, I can see why you'd be very binary in saying this is right, this is wrong, here's what's going on. But he was speaking with such conviction, such certainty of what is happening right now in the war. I won't rehash that specifically. We'll talk a little bit about some of these things that are happening, but just the perspective he had. He kept saying, well, I don't have, classified intel. I'm just like, okay, well, you're sharing as if you do, as if you're certain that you know exactly what's going on. So I just say that to say, guys, a lot of the people you're hearing talking about this, talking about the implications, talking about what's going to happen, what are the possible consequences. I think it's great for people to share their perspectives. That's what I'm doing right now. But I'm leery when I hear people say they know exactly what's happening. Here are the consequences. Here's what's going to happen if this doesn't stop in a week, whatever. All right. So I think being humble and having a humble posture and approach is really important. And also just ask God about it. Like the Lord's going to push you, lead us into who we should listen to, who we should be plugged into. But I'm going to talk about some of the perspectives I'm hearing and then what I think is going on and why and I'll just say this on the front end, why I'm trusting President Trump. Okay. President Trump is not perfect, but I believe, and I will say this, and I say this with conviction. And, also, I say this with humility. Like, I'm not the purveyor. I'm not going to pretend like I somehow know everything that's going on or that I know all the stuff that I believe God's doing through President Trump. But what I believe is, I believe that God has raised up Donald Trump for such a time as this. I believe that, guys. I believe he's anointed for the task at hand. And just a quick theology analysis. God anoints and appoints those who are imperfect. We see that time and time again. So if it's offensive for you to rationalize that, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you, but I think you should talk to the Lord about that. Ask God about it, because you see time and time again, God will use people who are imperfect to effectuate his purposes. And I believe wholeheartedly that's what he's doing with Donald Trump. That's my belief, at least. So let me talk to you about what some of the perspectives I'm seeing. And I hate to qualify and just say these are the only three perspectives. Clearly, it's more nuanced, and you see iterations of these. But I feel like these are the three competing perspectives and for the perceived status quo. What do I mean by perceived status quo? A perceived status quo, when I think about that, when I say that, is it's the narrative these groups of people want you to believe has the most plurality of support with people, okay? In this nation, but also abroad, but specifically in America. The first is this belief that this is not America first. This is not America first. Donald Trump is controlled by Israel. He's being pushed into this by them. He's completely breaching his contract, his fidelity to the America First MAGA doctrine. And, he's being used as a tool by Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Clearly, I'm not going to get into Israel's role. Clearly, Israel has wanted this war. I think it's pretty clear. They want war with Iran. They are fighting, it seems like, for regional hegemony, which makes sense. I mean, I think any regional power that feels, or any country that feels threatened is going to want to have security, is going to want to have regional hegemony, meaning control, influence. But that seems pretty clear. Okay, let me talk to you just a few quick reasons as to why I think that's untrue. Firstly, if you're saying Donald Trump is controlled by Israel, this is an America First because he's taking money from people who are Israel supporters, who are Jewish. Like, that means any politician, because every politician has donors. So that means any politician who has donors, they're controlled by their donors. That's what you're saying. And that's the perspective I'm hearing from a few people, or maybe by a lot, but I know some who are well-known influencers are saying that. That's just a poor logic. And if you deduce that, well, you have to deduce that and apply that to everyone, okay? So that's why I think, first of all, it's bogus. Secondly, we see that, and you can talk about how involved or lack of involvement the United States has had with the war in Gaza, Israel's war with the Hamas and Palestine and the Palestinians. I mean, I'm not going to get into that. But firstly, they want regional hegemony, right? Israel does. They wanted to annex Gaza. They wanted complete control of that area. It's very clear that's what they wanted. Donald Trump has been openly has prevented that from happening. Okay, if Israel controlled him, if they manipulated him, then he would not come out and aggressively oppose that. Secondly, Israel, clearly they're wanting influence in that region. There's a lot of conflict with Qatar. I think they even attacked Qatar several months ago, and Donald Trump came in and put a stop to that almost immediately. And these are just a few quick examples of that narrative, and there's more we could share. But if you're hearing people say that, I'm just going to tell you guys, I would probably tune them out. I'm not saying everything they're saying is wrong, but I tune them out as far as that perspective, because I think that's wrong. I don't think that's right. I think that there's facts and analysis that undermine that narrative, okay? And this not being America First, we'll talk more about that. But the whole America First narrative, guys, this conversation that's happening right now, and what that even looks like, none of that was happening before Donald Trump came on the scene. So when you hear people say, of course, this is not America First, and Donald Trump is violating his oath, I'm just like, look, guys, as with anything, let this play out. People who are impulsively responding, and I get the fact, look, President Trump has, and we'll talk more about this here in a second, but look at the track record. Think of the track record. Think of how committed, and you can try to ascribe any motive you want to him, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's clear he is like borderline obsessed with being the peacetime president, the peacemaker. He talks about that all the time. He's constantly engaged with other countries, trying to bring stability, trying to bring peace. So think about this in the context of what's going on right now. So when someone tells you, and you have people shouting and screaming, this is not America First, Donald Trump is violating his oath, he's breaching his contract with the MAGA doctrine, just step back and turn that off and try to think about this in terms of, this has been a week. Look at his track record, look at what he's already done, and think about President Trump, and this is why I fully believe this, and I'll talk more about this here in a second, is, I think, again, I'll use the word obsessed, like borderline obsessed with trying to do whatever he possibly can to make America great. And that's not just a fun little moniker, that's true. Like, he's obsessed with trying to better America, and by doing that, better the lives of people. And you can ascribe any motive you want to him. But like, that to me is abundantly clear. He's seriously wanting to fortify, establish, bring prosperity to this country. So I don't ascribe to that narrative. I don't believe it's right. I don't believe it's informed. So that's the first perspective I think people have. The second one, okay? It seems to me there are a group of people who literally have a bloodlust. That anytime there's talk about war, they are like hook, line, and sinker, lockstep with wanting war. Of course, they probably would be the last person to volunteer to go to war or volunteer any of their family members to go to war, but they're perfectly okay with sending your brother, your dad, whomever, to go and fight their own battles. And so it's mind-boggling to me when I hear that. And so when you hear people talk about, well, this conflict is just it's been long overdue. This is exactly what we should be doing, and not just like supporting President Trump, because that's my perspective, and I'll talk about that again here in a second. When you hear the people who've been lusting for this, and then you hear people talking about, we have to go after Qatar next, and we have to go after Cuba next, we have to go after Turkey next. It's the people, and you could call them neocons, and this transcends party affiliation, because again, it's not just the Republicans, it's not just the Democrats, it's both. The neocon lust for war has permeated both parties, and you can talk about why that is. My belief is these people are paid off. Some of them just have a weird fascination and lust for war because, it's stimulating to them in some weird, just strange way. But clearly there's a segment of people that will tell you that anytime there's a conflict or potential conflict, we need to go to fight. We need to have war constantly. And that immediately will raise red flags to me. And by the way, we never, a part of, in my belief with the foreign policy doctrine, is that if a nation can't defend itself, then I'm not sure that that's a part of being a nation. You should be able to defend yourself. Of course, we have alliances. But at no point, and this is my belief, should America ever go to war because of the interests of another country. And some people, for example, some people in our country would say, well, we should go to war because this nation needs us to go to war on their behalf. There's openly people calling for that. I don't agree to that doctrine. I don't agree with that perspective at all. And when I hear people saying that, that immediately raises a red flag. What are you saying? So we're supposed to go to war because it serves this country's best interest? Absolutely not. I don't agree to that. I don't subscribe to that. And by the way, I don't believe Donald Trump subscribes to that either. There may be at times where it serves both of our interests, potentially, but just a default position, absolutely not. So again, I think that perspective, and you'll hear people tell you, and you hear, certain news stations will tell you this. There are people on Fox News that I like a lot, but for example, Fox News will, anytime there's a war, dude, it's like the most exciting thing that happens to that news station. War, great. How can we just further this war and talk about how great it is to be involved in this conflict? War's never great. You shouldn't be glorifying war. It's a horrendous thing. It's an unfortunate thing that still happens because God allows it to happen, and oftentimes He uses that. If it's, I don't know if it can ever be waged in the right way, but if God's moving in the midst of it, then absolutely it can be used for His purposes. But it's an awful manifestation of the fallenness of man. So it never should be glorified. So when I see people doing that perspective, you see it out there. I could talk more about that and give examples of people, and I'm trying not to go there. I'm just trying to lay out perspectives of how I believe it's wrong. And I don't believe that is the right perspective to adhere to or to be beholden to. The next one is just the Trump derangement syndrome perspective. And it's it doesn't matter what Trump does. It doesn't matter how successful our country is. It doesn't matter how tangible things he's done already to make this country far more successful than the previous administration. It doesn't matter what he does. There is a symptom. There actually is a condition called Trump derangement syndrome. And it is the media are the main purveyors of this. I'm not going to, I've done different podcasts and reels about how the media will, completely manipulate the truth to present a skewed perspective, to inundate people and to brainwash, mind control people into hating Trump. It's just, it's been going on like this since 2015. But when I see people, immediately politicians talking about, this is so wrong, or specifically the Democrat Party, because the Trump derangement syndrome has permeated that party, and you have never Trumpers in the Republican Party too. There are very few and far between. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump's favorability within the Republican Party is it's substantial, one of the greatest favorabilities of any Republican in a long time. So he's reshaped the Republican Party. By the way, if you're not down with Trump in the Republican Party, there's probably not a place for you. That's just the truth. Like, that's, if you openly come out as a Republican and attack Trump, it's just the bottom line. Is like, that's what's happening. That's how much control and influence, and not just his control, but what he's done, the messaging he presents, how it's resonated with people who identify themselves as conservative Republicans. So anyway, I digress. So you have people who, no matter what he does, it's, we should not be involved in this conflict. This is not like serve America's interest. But all these people were the first ones who wanted to give billions and still want to give trillions of dollars to Ukraine, that has perpetuated a war. It's perpetuated a conflict to the tune of hundreds of thousands, millions of death. And so spare me your posturing of Donald Trump not doing something to benefit America and involving himself and our country in this conflict, when you guys were the first and you've continually been fomenting desires and fomenting a narrative that's cost our nation trillions of dollars, and to be honest, has depleted our munitions. That's just the truth. Like the munitions that we're needing to fight a war, for example, you all have wanted to give those munitions to Ukraine. Okay, so spare me the narrative that somehow you're opposed to this primarily because this does not serve America's best interest, when that war legitimately has been to the detriment of probably every single person on the earth. So anyway, I'm going to shut it down on that topic. The last several minutes, I'm going to talk about my final thought. And that's why I'm trusting Trump and what I think is going on. And again, it's humble perspective, guys. I don't know completely. But as I said from the onset, my default is I trust Donald Trump's instincts. I trust his commitment to establishing a world of peace, which is what has been clearly his mandate and what he's expressed to us. And I think one of the things that a politician, unlike almost any other politician, what Donald Trump says, he means. And he actually fulfills his promises. It's just the truth. Like, one of the things that people can't stand about Trump is he is who he is, man. When he says something, he means it and he follows through with it. And so when I hear him talk that he wants to establish peace, and I see him establishing peace literally with 16 different nations already in less than a year of his presidency, it's incredible. He actually wants to do that. So if he's taking action against a nation right now, against Iran, I believe he's taking that because it's going to serve our interests. How? I don't really know, honestly. I can theorize, right? I can say, well, I believe, for example, Donald Trump is taking action right now against Iran because I think Iran probably has become too close to China. China gets, 14-15% of their oil from Iran. They got, close to 4 or 5% of their oil from Venezuela. That's almost over a quarter of their oil from Venezuela and Iran, which clearly is going to cause a big dent in their economy. That is, people can say that when 20% of your energy is now being taken and diverted somewhere else. And you can say, well, China's preparing for that, whatever. I don't know. I'm just saying, for example, China clearly is our greatest geopolitical threat on the earth. I think everyone would agree with that. They have been waging all sorts of silent wars against us, and we can talk. You could look that up. That's not the point here. But silent wars meaning passive, Cold War, so to speak, against America. So obviously, I think he could be doing this because it may adversely impact China, for example. And also, we don't know legitimately how much of a threat Iran actually is. To our interest. And there are people around Iran that we're close with, that we get a lot of energy from, that Iran hates. Okay, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, for example. We don't know the aggressive nature. It's clear they were the number one state sponsor of terror in the world. I think that's just clear. And obviously, I think most people could say that the Ayatollah Khamenei, who passed away, who got killed, clearly hated America, clearly was a pretty radical person. And so there are a lot of different possible hypotheticals. And clearly, again, I go back to the default position. President Trump has shown what he wants to do is to bring safety, prosperity, and success to America. So there's a lot of different contingencies that I think could be happening here with why he's done that. I'll close with this. Be open-handed. I think you should trust Trump, trust his instinct, and trust that if this goes on longer than it should, he's going to give us an explanation as to why that is. All right, so hopefully my perspective has been somewhat helpful. And again, I could talk longer about this, but this was more of a synopsis and a cursory of what I think. All right, guys.